This episode and every episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show is brought to you by Ironmonger Brewing. Visit Ironmonger at their tap room in Marietta, Georgia, or online at ironmongerbrewing.com.
Open up a tab, grab a seat, and pour a pint. It's time for the Beer Guys Radio Show.
You want free beer? Go to the brewery.
Dedicated to the art, science, and enjoyment of craft beer.
Yo, what's wrong with the beer we got?
Now, here are your hosts, Tim Dennis and Brian Hewitt.
Welcome to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We're broadcasting from the Beer Guys Radio Studios in Marietta, Georgia. Brian, this is a big episode for us. Do you know what this is?
No, what is it?
This is our 200th episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Way.
That's right, man. It is. And we are thrilled to have Arizona's Tombstone Brewing joining us today. I am Tim Dennis, and with me as always is my good friend and co-host, Brian Hewitt.
Hey, Tim. So we do have Matt Brown, the founder and the owner of Tombstone Brewing Company, with us today. Believe it or not, they're based out of Tombstone, Arizona, Tim. You might not have known that. We're going to talk about barrel-aged beers, IPAs, brewing IPAs with unusual yeasts, and crazy yeast hybrids. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. So how is the weather in Tombstone this time of year?
Presently, it is cool and windy.
Cool. Okay. All right.
You can pretty much bank on Tombstone being windy. It's perched on a mesa above a big plain, so it gets wind constantly coming off the mountains to the south.
Okay. Tumbleweeds rolling through and stuff.
I was going to say,
right?
Believe it or not, tumbleweeds are pervasive.
I had a lot of those when I lived in Nebraska. We would actually get tumbleweeds in some of the woods out there. So, yeah.
Where did those come from? Just dead shrubbery that picks up and rolls around?
Believe it or not, it's something called Russian thistle, which isn't even a native plant. It's actually a invasive species. And it turns out it grows really well in the American West. So it grows and grows, and then when it dies, it's got a real shallow root system. And when it's dead, there's nothing to hold the soil together. So the soil breaks apart and they roll around.
It's the West kudzu.
Oh, yeah.
It is. It is, exactly.
Yeah.
I did not realize that tumbleweeds were immigrants, too.
How about
no
that?
idea.
Crazy stuff.
How about that?
Well, Brian, we had a good week. Took it a little easy, but we got another Oktoberfest party in.
We did.
And I think we've Oktoberfested as much as we can.
As hard as we could for as long as we could,
I think probably 6 or so Oktoberfest celebrations that we went to.
Yeah, half dozen sounds about right.
Yeah. Matt, do you throw down big for Oktoberfest at Tombstone?
We do. This year we released a can of our fest beer. We had like a big party with several different food vendors, and we had 8 other Arizona breweries come and represent their product. So we had a big party. We've got a few city lots for the brewery, and the back's sort of empty. So we had tents and live music and all sorts of fun stuff.
That's what I'm talking about. Sounds like a good time. We were talking a few weeks ago with Liz Garibay, the executive director of the Chicago Brewseum, about how America doesn't really have their own drinking holidays, but we appropriate everybody else's. We'll take them.
Nice.
We'll make them our own. Absolutely.
Even if they aren't drinking holidays, we'll make them into drinking holidays. Yes.
Just wait till you see Christmas in 25 years.
Yes,
or so.
It'd be fantastic.
Well, it's a drinking holiday anyhow.
Yeah, kind of.
Get the eggnog and stuff. So we also went out, Brian. We had some donuts.
Yes.
Went to Revolution Donuts down there, coffee and donuts that they recommended by the folks at Eventide when we were down there for their Oktoberfest party. And Brian, 200 episodes. So I got a question for you. You've been here for 150 or so,
probably,
I guess, as host for probably 100 episodes or
something like
ballparkish.
that.
What has been your most memorable moment or your favorite moment of these 200 episodes?
Well, the one I keep going back to is the one where the guy said I was right about
that's right,
decoction mashing. I'm like, yes.
Yes, New Glarus.
Yeah, New Glarus. Dan Carey.
Yes,
right?
Daniel Carey.
Yes, got his name right too. I remembered. Awesome. I like that just because, it's nice. The guy's legendary, and he seemed to be legitimately impressed by something I said. I'm like, that doesn't happen very often. So that was one of my happiest moments. I got to tell you.
That's good stuff. Yeah, we've had a fun 4 years, man. We've talked to some great people. When we started this, we started off as a Georgia brewing show and really didn't plan on being nationwide. We actually talked to people and said, we're going to cover local beer. But as I mentioned, Huntsville, a station in Huntsville said they wanted to add our show, and we just kind of rolled from there. Brian, we were on 35 stations across the country now, all the way up from Alaska down to Florida, Georgia, and now, Brian, I don't know if you're aware of this, we're also in the U.S. Virgin Islands, covering the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico.
Yeah, they're called the Virgin Islands and not the Virginia
Not the Virginia
Island.
Do you know that, though?
Oh, I just found that out recently. Yeah.
Good stuff.
But, it was a good time. I'm going to miss the Oktoberfest. But you know what? I realized I was ready to move on when I drank their, was it Eventide's Midnight Hour, which is a Schwartz beer. I had that, and that outshined everything else for me. I'm ready to move on from Oktoberfest. I'm finally ready to move on.
Well, Schwartz beer is kind of acceptable for Oktoberfesty, isn't it?
Yeah, but I kind of feel like it's more of a, now we're getting into wintertime.
Okay, the transitional beers.
I could drink it anytime, but I felt like it was a message from beer telling me to move on.
Okay, it's time to move on. When beer speaks to you, you should listen.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
So, Tim, what are the beers of the week for this auspicious week?
Crack open a cold one. It's the Truck and Tap Beer of the Week. Woo-hoo! Craft beer and food trucks in downtown Woodstock. Truckandtap.com.
Well, Brian, as always, we've got a great selection to drink from. We pre-gamed. We're still drinking through a stash of some WeldWorks beers here. We had some more juicy bits, and then we got into a Sierra Nevada, the Sierra Vesa, little easy drinker there.
Yes.
And, of course, we've got some Tombstone beers. We are currently drinking. Matt, I'm going to ask you to pronounce this because when I saw Brian put it down, I thought it was a typo. So how do you say this one?
I don't know how the writer of the sign said it originally,
All right.
but I read it as all purses will be checkers to every person.
Checkers to every person. So that's an IPA. So we're enjoying that. We also have Tombstone's More Hops, and we're going to get into Tombstone Grand Cru Russian Imperial Stout, Brian.
Sounds fantastic.
Absolutely. So, Brian, what's happening this week in the news?
What's in the news? The beer guys have the scoop.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
Time for headlines.
As you may have heard, Tim, Big Beer just can't catch a break.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, according to Brewbound, Miller Coors has announced layoffs and massive restructuring. The plan involves closing their office in Denver, which is a big deal, and moving that new location to their North American headquarters to Chicago. They also plan to consolidate their corporate center, 4 business units around the world, into just 2 business units, Molson Coors North America and Molson Coors Europe. The company is planning on cutting between 400 and 500 jobs. This is after cutting 350 jobs back in late October. And the money saved from these closures and these layoffs, the company plans to reinvest $150 million annually into their core products, their, quote, above premium offerings, innovations, and alternative beverages, which I think we can all assume means hard seltzer.
Bring on the seltzers, right?
Yes. So
I saw that they also did a hard coffee as part of our hard coffee beer that they have out there. So putting all those in, I think I saw they're changing the name of the company to, is it Molson Coors Beverage Company?
I think that's right. From Miller Coors to Molson Coors Beverage Company.
And they said they wanted that to reflect the fact that that's something when they take beer out, man. They're looking hard on those alternative beverages.
Closing down big offices, consolidating, and Pete Coors is retiring as the chief customer relations officer at the end of 2019, and 2 other high-level executives will also be leaving the company before 2019.
Big changes in the beer world.
So we have some interesting yeast news this week from AmericanCraftBeer.com. Scientists have discovered that some Belgian beers are fermented with an unusual hybrid yeast. This rare yeast has DNA that combines traditional yeast ale with more stress-resistant wild yeast strains. Researchers are saying that this could lead to a wide variety of new beer flavors in the future. As Dr. Jan Steensels, a researcher at the Leuven Center for Microbiology, puts it, it's like, think of putting lions and tigers together to make a super baby. So we know that ligers and tigans are pretty amazing, so this is big news. So anyway, the research has taken years because none of the existing pipelines for analyzing and sequencing DNA are set up to deal with this kind of mixed origin. So there's no telling how soon you will see super baby yeast satchels at your homebrew shop.
We've had a lot of fun lately with yeast in the brewing world.
Yes.
And, we've talked quite a bit about Quike and what you can do with that and just amazing stuff there. So, it's interesting to see something that sounds like, yeast is ancient. Yes. Yeast has been around forever, but still these discoveries, new things that they can do, or not even new discoveries. Quike's been around for a while, but I guess the brewing world outside of, where it's from, is the Norwegian has just discovered it.
And the interesting thing is it's not just lambics they're finding it in, just your classic Belgian styles. They also have these interesting hybrid yeasts.
Very cool, man. Yep. Very cool. You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We do need to take a break, but we'll be back very soon to talk more with Tombstone Brewing. Brian and Tim, the beer guys. If you're like us, no lunch or dinner is complete without a pint or two of craft beer.
Which is why Truck and Tap in downtown Woodstock, Alpharetta, and Duluth are always on our list. Tim, why do they call it Truck and Tap?
Well, the tap part is easy, Brian. They've got 18 of them.
As for the truck part, that's where it gets interesting. Truck and Tap features your favorite Atlanta area food trucks, so you're getting a different menu every day.
Truck and Tap in downtown Woodstock, Alpharetta, and Duluth.
Truckandtap.com. Let them know that the beer guys sent you.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Now, back to the Beer Guys radio show.
Welcome back to the Beer Guys radio show. If you miss an episode, don't worry. All episodes are available as a podcast. Subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and never miss a show. Now back to our conversation with Matt Brown and Tombstone Brewing Company.
Well, Matt, we mentioned there in the first segment we were drinking your IPA called All Purses Will Be Checkers to Every Person. So can you tell us a little bit about this beer and the story behind the name?
Yeah, so the beer itself is pretty typical of the way that we approach IPAs. So you'd call it a New England style, so it's hazy and juicy. This particular one uses El Dorado, Citra, and Amarillo hops. It's one of our unusually branded beers, though. If you look at it, it looks basically like the signs at the border when you cross into Mexico. We're about half an hour north of Mexico, and there's a particular border patrol checkpoint going into Mexico where you walk by this sign that has I don't know what you'd call it when it's a Spanish translation that's just so bad. And if it were in China or Japan, it'd be called English, right?
English, right, yeah.
It's their equivalent of that. And this is actually our second beer like this. The first one was called All the People Will Be Checked the Handbag, which was essentially the same design, but this is All Purses Will Be Checkers to Every Person. We decided that purses should be the single IPA and handbag should be the double.
That makes sense, yeah. So. I guess.
That's interesting. I didn't realize. I saw that it was considerably different than the cans that I brought back when I was there some years ago, and I didn't realize that was meant to be that sign.
I didn't recognize that either.
I get it.
I don't cross the border that often though.
I don't either.
From Georgia. So
yeah, right.
Yeah,
difficult.
Exactly.
It's a difficult border to cross.
I did go to San Diego many years ago. Spent some time, and I did go down into Tijuana for a day trip. Got to haggle and buy some fake Oakleys for like $20, and had some churros from a street vendor. It was a good time.
Nice.
Brian. Good times.
I have never been directly south of the border. I've hopped,
flown over it.
I've flown over to other places, but never directly south.
Okay, yeah. As I'm sure you may know, we want to talk a little bit about Tombstone because I think that's a unique aspect of your brewery. And if my Googling serves me correctly, the population of Tombstone is only about 1,300 people. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, that sounds like if you counted every person that stays in Tombstone routinely. I think you got that number.
Okay.
I bet if you were to knock door to door today, you'd find about less than 1,000 permanent residents, probably more like 900 or 800.
Okay, wow. Gotcha. Now, but you get a lot of tourist traffic there, correct?
Yeah, they tell us that it's the second largest tourist attraction in Arizona, second only to the Grand Canyon.
Okay, yeah, I hit number one. I should have hit number two.
So, what made you decide to build a brewery in Tombstone, Arizona?
So my wife is actually from this area. So Tombstone is in Cochise County, which has the big city down here is Sierra Vista, and by big city, I'd have to use air quotes because I don't know the population, but I think it's 50,000 on it, maybe even less. And then Bisbee and Douglas and Wilcox, and that pretty much does it for the county. But it's a huge county; it's bigger than Connecticut, but I think low 100,000 people. So my wife's actually from here; she's fifth generation, and we lived up in Phoenix, and I was a real avid home brewer and real active in beer, the BJCP stuff up there, and had sort of had a business plan for a brewery in my back pocket. And she wanted to pursue some better opportunities that were available down here. I was a lawyer. I had a law firm doing criminal defense and had been doing that for about a decade. And yeah, it seemed like I was up for a change. She was up for taking a better opportunity. So I closed down my firm and we I followed her down here. While she was interviewing for the job, I had actually was playing with my daughter in a convention center in Bisbee, which is the county seat. And I saw a building in Tombstone that was for sale, and it said formerly built to be a brewery. Brewery went out of business, was City Hall, and then a backpack factory. So, yeah. So I was like,
Good
well, that's
sign.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I called the realtor on the sign and packed my daughter in the car, and we went and looked at the building, and my wife got the job. I bought the building, and 6 months later, we got a brewery.
What I think is interesting in doing our research for the show, I saw that actually there's been quite a few breweries in Tombstone over the years. Like probably only you right now, but maybe 5, 6, 10, something like that over the years. Is that sound about right?
Yeah, so it depends on who you ask. You know, records weren't great back in its heyday. Like when Tombstone was really a city, it's hard to get correct data. One of the local historians claims an insanely high number of breweries. Like he claims that we're like the 111th or something like that.
Wow. That's something.
But yeah, there's a bunch of them because there's Golden Eagle, which was the sort of the famous one. There was another one off of Allen Street that was operated out of a tent. There were a couple other brick and mortar ones, but of the ones that I've looked up, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's probably less than 10, but definitely more than 5.
I think Brian found in his research that it was reported there were at one point like 110 saloons, like over 100 saloons in Tombstone in its heyday.
Yeah, it was a crazy big town. I mean, it had luxury accommodations. People came from all over. The same historian that gave us the number on the breweries in town had said that some of the first refrigerated rail cars to carry a Busch beer, like the original Budweiser, they were going to Tombstone.
That's crazy to think
That
about.
is.
All because somebody struck silver there, right? I think that's what drove it all, right?
Not gold, silver.
I think it was silver.
Yeah,
Was it gold?
Yeah. Tombstone's a silver town. So it was Ed Schieflin, who the name from the town comes. He was a military person, military scout of some kind, and he found what he thought was going to be a good claim. And because of the dangers of the Chiricahua Apache nearby, someone made a comment where all you're going to find in those hills is your tombstone. So he named the town Tombstone.
What a name to stick. Someone joked with us when we said we were talking to Tombstone on our 200th anniversary. They're like, "Is that a bad omen to talk to?"
Maybe we should have thought that one over a bit. So there has to be some interesting challenges to operating a brewery in kind of a small remote town like that, right? It's got to be.
Oh yeah, I mean, if we run out of printer paper, we got to drive half an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one challenge. You know, most freight carriers, 90% of if someone ships something to us, we have to do the bills of lading and pick the carrier and everything because a lot of they'll get it to Tucson as promised, and a lot of them they'll say, oh well, we only go that far south every fourth Thursday. So it's so if we want to get stuff on time, it's really tough. That's a challenge. You know, you got the sort of wild animal issue as well. If we get a delivery of grain and set it out back because we're doing something, I mean, we have plenty of species that would love to come and chow down. So it's not uncommon for our cameras at the brewery in a given day to catch several herds of deer, javelina, which they look like pigs, but they're actually closely related to rodents.
I thought they were a wild boar.
Huh.
So.
Yeah, no, they're actually a peccary, I think is what they're called, and they're closer related to rats. They're like giant rodents.
They have an obesity epidemic down there with the deer because of the brewery.
That's it.
The problem is we had a deer a couple of years ago, a little buck, and he would come in the brewery. Like he would, if the bartender was closing down for the day and left the door open, the deer would just walk in and check things out, have a look around. They named him Dash. We had a big event one night, and he followed a group of people back to their their hotel room, snuck in the hotel room, ate their popcorn, and left.
He sounds pretty cool. I want to hang out with him.
Yeah, unfortunately, as soon as hunting season started, we never saw poor Dash again.
That's what you get for being a friendly deer. Yeah. You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We do need to take another break, but we'll be back very soon with more from Tombstone Brewing. Is your brewery or restaurant flooring all jacked up? Your foundation needs to be protected from heat, chemicals, and other contaminants. At the same time, you want to make sure it's slip resistant and you can clean up your messes with soap and water. You know who to call?
ResTech.
We've been manufacturing poured-in-place flooring since 2002, and we've got solutions to fit any facility's needs. Go on and visit our website at
ResTech.net.
That's RES-TEK.net. Drop us a line and we will come to you for a free evaluation.
Oh, yeah.
Craft beer forged with a reverence for tradition and new styles that start a revolution. Ironmonger Brewing. The brewers at Ironmonger Brewing pride themselves at being masters of barrel-aged, hoppy, and sour beers. They invite you to their tap room in Marietta, Georgia to taste and see. Also visit their barrel room for an intimate drinking experience with great live entertainment. Keep up to date on all things Ironmonger by liking them on Facebook. Ironmonger Brewing, establishing a new standard in craft beer.
As a brewery owner or taproom manager, are you looking for ways to enhance your customer experience while maximizing your revenues? Craft Cellar is a mobile solution that helps your brewery drive sales and attract new customers through online pre-sales for beer releases, events, and memberships. Get details now at craftcellar.com. Mention Beer Guys Radio after sign up and extend your free trial to a full 30 days. Remember craftcellar.com, craftcellr.com.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Oh, God, here we go again. Dork alert.
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. I want to give a quick shout out to one of our great radio affiliates, WNAE 96.7 FM in Warren, Pennsylvania. Catch Beer Guys Radio on WNAE every Saturday at 1 a.m. local time. Now back to our conversation with Matt Brown and Tombstone Brewing Company.
Matt, you mentioned briefly in the last segment talking about home brewing there. And I saw an interview that your head brewer, Weedy Weidenthal, did and was talking about home brewing scene. And a quick little note there on Weedy. So we have a slight connection there. I say ever so slight, but the first radio station that we were on outside of Atlanta was in Huntsville, Alabama. And Weedy came to you from Blue Tarp Brewing there in Huntsville. And
Blue Tarps
here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Right? Blue Pants Brewing. And, came over there, and they were one of the first breweries we had them on in our early days, Matt. So just a little bit of a connection there.
Nice.
So, but he had mentioned in the interview talking about the home brewing there, and they were asking him the difference kind of in the Huntsville scene and the scene there in Tombstone. And he was saying that people there are pretty serious about their home brewing. He said, if I talk to half a dozen home brewers, probably 5 of them have some level of BJCP certification. So is the homebrew scene there pretty serious?
Oh, yeah. I mean, not as much in Tombstone, although I think you'd be surprised even in Tombstone. We probably have just that come to the brewery routinely, a couple dozen homebrewers. They're not all in Tombstone, but they're in the neighboring areas. But in Arizona generally, I would say it's one of the most impressive homebrew scenes, in the country. I know that the Arizona Society of Homebrewers out of Phoenix area, that they were the biggest homebrew club in the nation for a while. One of their presidents actually went on to be the director of the Craft Brewers Guild here in Arizona. Yeah, I had been really involved with ASH for a while. I was their competition committee coordinator, so I ran all their competitions and did their BJCP classes for a few years, taught those. So yeah, it was huge. At some point it was hundreds and hundreds of homebrewers. In the beginning, there weren't a lot of BJCP people, but there have been a few people that have really stepped up trying to make that a thing here. I know that I think the communications director for the BJCP lives up in Phoenix, and he's been doing great stuff trying to get more homebrewers educated. It's crazy, the quality of homebrewer in Arizona. Some of those competitions, you'd have half the beers were commercial quality. It's a crazy homebrew scene. And I think the theory, at least that most of us that were involved in it had was that Arizona had such a locked-in distribution sort of monopoly by these couple companies that we just didn't get much. And so people started resorting to brewing their own.
Got to up their game, man.
Yeah, I think that was the same thing in Georgia, a few years ago. I know people who brewed extensively, say 3 to 4 years ago, that don't do it as much because our distribution has expanded so much. The number of breweries we have in the state, as well as the brews coming in here from out of state, there's just a heck of a selection now. And I know with us, Brian, time is not on our side with it, but also the availability of beers. When we started homebrewing, you had 1 or 2 annual releases that people really chased after. But we didn't have the variety that we do now.
Those big, rare barrel-aged stouts that we really love so much, and they came out once a year maybe, and you had to get in line for them if you wanted it. And so the impetuous there to brew your own or try your hand at it. So that's what got us into it originally.
Yeah. Well, Matt, with all those high-level homebrewers out there, how often do you hear, you know what you should do?
All the time. I mean, that's
sure.
It's the same as the moment you start a brewery. Everyone is an expert on what you should do at your brewery, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we get lots of nice pointers. Yeah,
it's good that they're there to offer you advice.
yeah. Just in case we're a little confused about the process.
Right.
Let's get into the beer we're drinking here. We just opened up more hops. So tell us a little bit about this one. I see on the can it mentions copious amounts of lupulin powder. I guess that tells you a little bit of something about it, but what else should we know about this?
Yeah, so this was actually our first packaged IPA ever. And our intention was to brew an IPA that was right on the border between a regular IPA and a double. I think we actually technically classify it as a double, maybe. Yeah, our goal was, lupulin powder at that point was sort of a newish product in that it wasn't really used, and when it was used, it wasn't necessarily advertised. So along with hop hash, which is a sort of similar product but different, we'd used both of those in a couple beers. The idea is that it's supposed to be more intense than just using pellets or whole leaves. It's a cryo hop product, so it's designed to have more intensity than you'd get from just your normal products. So we did that. We did a quadruple dry hop. We wanted it to be super drinkable, so that's why that alcohol's on the low end of the double IPA, but we also wanted it to just be insanely intense, which hence the quadruple dry hop and the lupulin powder, all that other stuff.
You know what I like about this one is there's huge hop flavor. The bitterness isn't bracing though. And something, Matt, I talk about all the time. I don't like the hardcore West Coast. Give me a little bit of malt, give me the juicy hops flavors in that. But don't knock my teeth out with IBUs.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely our philosophy. Is that we don't want to make the Mikkeller 1000 IBU beer, right?
Right.
And we want the intensity of putting a ridiculous amount of hops in these beers. I mean, we make a beer called Most Hops. That's Big Brother, and we put 13.5 pounds per barrel in there.
Wow.
And yeah, which is nuts. At the time we wrote the recipe, Weedy wrote the recipe with 13 pounds per barrel, but then a brewery, I forget which one it was, announced they had made a 13 pound per barrel hop beer, and we were like, well, let's add an extra half pound. It can't be can't play second fiddle.
So what are you going to call the next one when you up it to 15 pounds a barrel?
I don't know.
Go with mostest.
Yeah, I was thinking that we've already demonstrated a disregard for grammar. So
yeah, you've already set that precedent. You can do what you want from that point. Yeah. Speaking of hops, if I saw correctly, is there a hop farm about 35 miles from Tombstone? A hop ranch, I think.
Yeah, there's Copper Hop Ranch, which is a tiny brewery. They're brewing on I want to say it's a 1 barrel or a half barrel system, and they've got a hop field. It's a super cool place if you're ever in the area, because it's just beautiful. You drive out in these grasslands, you got these huge peaks that are snow-capped half the year. The hop operation isn't big. I mean, it's sort of like your front yard, but it's awesome. They serve beer out of this little, it looks like one of those ice cream shacks that they have in beach towns. They serve beer out of that. The brewery's just sort of in this outbuilding, and then they live in a house that's right next to all of it. So it's a super tiny it's a really cool place. So they grow their hops. There's also a vineyard called Hops and Vines that actually just had a meadery open in it. And they've tried hop growing as well. No one does it on like a real big commercial scale down here, though.
Do they fare fairly well there?
Yeah, they do.
There's got to be some varieties that do better than others, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I think they're still figuring that out. That I think that it's not the same sorts of soils that you get in the Pacific Northwest, which is where most of our hops come from, and the days aren't as long here as they are further north during the growing season. So I think that the cones that just don't end up, like when we flew out to Oregon in September to select lots of hops at a Crosby hop farm, I mean, those are like dinosaur-sized hop cones, and they're just like ridiculous. And it's just shocking. They're growing them 18 feet tall on what looks like telephone poles with these giant wires, and it's hundreds and hundreds of acres of hops everywhere, and it's just insane. And nobody's tried that scale here, but there's definitely a lot of people that are dipping their toes into it. We have one lady that is out in Wilcox who grows hops just on the side of her house. She has trellises from her roof to the ground, and she does a great job. I mean, she sells us quite a few pounds every year, and I think she's figuring out which varieties at this point. Like she did Comet and Cascade, and both of those seem pretty good. We've done them in we've mostly used them for beers where we're just adding hops to a barrel. So something like a dry hop saison that's been barrel aged, that's the sort of thing we use them for, just because 10 pounds of hops isn't going to make much of a difference if we're brewing a 15-barrel batch.
Right. Fun to play with them, though, right? See what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We do need to take another break, but we'll be back very soon with more from Tombstone Brewing.
Have you ever thought about owning your own brewery but don't know what it takes to get one built? We're Storytime Construction, and we build breweries. We're Georgia's most experienced and hands-on contractors when it comes to building new breweries and tap rooms, or expanding existing breweries. We offer full build-outs, remodeling, and additions, as well as consulting and construction management. Give us a call at 770-733-4343. Storytime Construction. We build breweries.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Well, I'm sure I'd feel much worse if I weren't under such heavy sedation.
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/beerguys. Patrons get cool perks like Beer Guys swag, commercial-free episodes, and even bonus episodes that aren't available anywhere else. Tim, we've got a new one this week, right?
We do. I don't remember what did we do, Brian?
So this weekend we recorded a couple. Was it one of the Firestone Walker Sakaba from 2014, or
no,
perhaps?
I believe it's the Bell's Black Note Stout.
Oh yeah,
mini episode is out there.
Yeah,
it went out there today. 16, yes, a little cellar beer.
So now back to our conversation with Matt Brown and Tombstone Brewing Company.
Matt, we've just opened up your Grand Cru Stout here. It's a fantastic, smooth, and delicious. And if I saw correctly, you do what's known as a reiterated mash on that beer. Is that right?
I certainly didn't do it. That's an awful lot of work. But Weedy did, our brewer.
Weedy. All right, Weedy.
Yeah. So you have him to thank for that. You basically do 2 mashes to make 1 batch. You do a normal mash. You fill the kettle after your sparge, and then you end up with your strike water for the next batch. And then the 100 gallons that were left in the boil kettle, he boiled that down to 50. So yeah, I think it was 18 hours to brew 1 batch.
Boil longer.
That sounds right. Boil.
Yeah,
now, did I see right? So with the reiterated mash, you're actually taking the wort and using it for your strike water, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's something.
That's fantastic.
And what are the benefits? Just getting higher starting gravity on a smaller vessel, or are there other benefits that you get doing it that way?
Yeah, so I mean, it has a lot of different benefits. At least we thought it would, and I think that the beer shows it. Is that the obsession now is to make the thickest beers you can possibly make. And this was certainly a technique that we thought would just get tons of fermentable sugars for us. Yeah, just result in a huge mouthfeel. Basically just the thickest beer we can make without resorting to any sort of additives.
And how long do you boil this one for?
I actually not totally sure how long the boil was. We've done them where we boil them forever, but because the gravity was so high on this to begin with, I think it was probably just a 2 or 3 hour boil.
All right.
Yeah, so it was, the amount of the first mashes worked, that got boiled during the time we were doing the second mash. So we basically boiled 100 gallons down to 50. So we basically made malt extract out of the wort that didn't end up becoming strike water. And then everything came so thick out of that second mash, and that's why, it was tough to even get it through the system to get it into the kettle to add to what we were boiling already. So I think that, a huge boil on top of that, I mean, maybe that'll be something we do next. But yeah, for this one, I don't think it was an especially insane boil. And in fact, we thought that we were getting so much sugar and so much character from the sugars that we were getting doing that process that we also wanted to add maple syrup to avoid like an unbalanced malt profile.
I just realized this beer is illegal in our state, Brian.
I was about to comment on it.
I just saw the ABV on it.
I didn't notice that drinking it does not feel like it's an illegal beer here in Georgia, but
15.9% ABV for those listening here, which is 1.9% higher than the state of Georgia thinks we can handle.
Well, that's only if you buy it. So we didn't actually buy this, so I think we're good.
Yeah, we can't get over 14 on our beer, but you can buy Quality House vodka for like $5 for a 55-gallon drum or something like that.
Sure. Oh, yeah, that's a completely different thing, though.
Nice. One of the things Wheaty really prides himself on is good fermentations. And one of the byproducts of that is that I feel like all of the beers that he makes, like everything like that, and Russian Imperial Stout, like the triple IPAs we've done, you end up with these really strong beers that just don't taste it.
Yeah. There's no way I would have pegged this one. I've had beers at 10, 11, 12% that are much boozier than what this one sounds like.
Yeah.
I think the trick is to have like 50% sugar left in the bottle.
That's right.
And I think that cuts the alcohol a little bit.
You just can't taste it through all of them, all that malt and all that sugar. So you were talking about the fermentation, and that brings me to something I was really interested in talking to you about. You're making, we're going to a different style now. You're making a lot of IPAs with unusual yeast strains, and you're involving biologists in this. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's an independent biologist who decided that he would try to create the perfect hybrid yeast for brewing New England IPAs. And what he ended up doing was creating 4 of them, and 2 of them were significantly more estery than the others. And we were able to convince him to let us take his 2 favorites and then have Imperial Organic Yeast up in the Portland area, have them step it up so we could brew beers with those. So again, he designed it so it would be the perfect New England IPA yeast. And so we brewed one called Chasing the Dragon, and we did an IPA and a double IPA. The idea of chasing the dragons in, like trying to catch that perfect unattainable thing. So yeah, we did that. And then today, actually, we can Chasing the Other Dragon, which was made with the other of the 2 most estery yeasts that he developed.
Will you be doing anything with the other 2 yeasts that were less estery?
We'll see. It was interesting. Like the first one had like a cotton candy thing going on. Like the yeast just had this really unique, like almost sugary smell to it that was like really unique. And then the one we canned today still had a little bit of that like really interesting sweetness, but it had lots of passion fruit. Yeah, lots of tropical and a little more peach than the other one did. So yeah, I think we'd like to, but I don't know what we'd call the next 2 since we've already done Chasing the Dragon and Chasing the Other Dragon.
Still chasing
Even
the dragon.
More dragons.
Yeah.
So,
chasing yet another dragon.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh my God.
Chasing the last dragon.
Yeah. With that cotton candy one, the slushy beers are crazy now. All those big fruity or fruited sours or something, that kind of note in it could play well there.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll give that a whirl.
Just do one called like the carnival ride. Put cotton candy in there. Maybe drop a corn dog in the batch.
Yeah. We could dry corn dog that one.
That's right.
What's the big candy hop? You can get those two together.
El Dorado?
Yeah, El Dorado.
Kind of dried candied fruit taste
get your cotton candy, whatever you want, actually. You get those two together. It could be a cotton candy dry hop lager.
Yeah, sounds perfect to me.
There we go. Yeah, see, we're making magic here, man.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Now, you guys do a lot of sour beers as well, right? You've got a fairly extensive sour program.
Yeah, we do. We have we actually have an entire refrigerated shipping container full of sour mixed fermentation beers. So Brett and barrels, blends of Brett, all sorts of different interesting bacterias. And we just released a series of beers that included a spontaneously fermented beer made with hibiscus and cantaloupe. Turned out really good.
Cool. Do you get like a good wild yeast there doing spontaneous? You have some yeast that play well out there in Tombstone?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what we've ended up doing, though, is that container, I'm pretty sure if you put, just like if you were a home brewer and you put your carboy with no yeast out in front of it, you'd have fermented beer in 2 days.
Okay.
It's whatever's in there. We've been doing this for 3 years. So it's, it just, whatever gets in that facility takes off and ferments. And it's got like a real unique house quality. It gets really tart. There's a subdued barnyard. There's almost a real intense pineapple note to the fermentations. So they make for great sours.
Tombstone's biodome out there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, you said something about barrels, and there was a question I had, and I think it ties back into the Grand Cru we're drinking. What is a sea salt barrel? I have never heard of that before.
Yeah, so someone was trying to make barrel-aged sea salt, and
okay.
Yeah. So they barrel-aged the sea salt, pumped the mix out, and then shipped us the barrel. So it's a bourbon. I mean, tasting what was from that barrel, I think it was pretty, the beer that was pumped out of there, it tastes to me like that was a bourbon barrel. But I mean, it was salty. It's because we did a variant of the same stout that's the base for the Grand Cru. We released the sea salt barrel one, but we tried it and it was just, it was saltier than any Goza I've ever tried. It was so salt that it was like metallic and almost tasted sour.
Wow.
Well, the concept sounds really fun, though.
Yeah, so we ended up diluting it. I think we did, 2-to-1 bourbon barrel stout to the sea salt, and it's still a really salty beer. But yeah, that's one part of what's in this in the Grand Cru.
Well, I think we're about out of time. So if people want to keep up with what's going on with Tombstone Brewing, where should they go?
Social media, Instagram and Facebook are our primary ones. Sometimes on Twitter, and then Weedy and I him more than me, will occasionally write blogs whenever we do anything new or anything particularly notable that we want to tell everyone about. So our website's tombstone.beer.
Good stuff, Matt. Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, that about wraps it up for this episode, the 200th episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show. Thank you so much for sticking along with us and listening in. Coming up next week, we're going to be talking with Josh Freem of Freem Family Brewers. For more craft beer info, follow us online. We are Beer Guys Radio on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great week, and don't forget to drink local. Cheers.